Ethan Drake opened his eyes to a haze of emerald-green light, a dazzling radiance that danced across his vision in gentle waves. The world around him felt thick, humid, and brimming with unfamiliar scents. His chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow breaths, as he struggled to recall how he had ended up in such a place. Though his limbs were stiff and his throat parched, an inexplicable sense of relief washed over him. He was alive. He remembered fragments. There had been a spaceship, a sudden failure in the auxiliary thrusters, and the violent rocking of his craft as it spiraled toward a planet whose name he did not know. Now, lying on soft ground strewn with curious, feathery plants, he wondered what manner of fate had spared him from an outright death in the crash. He sucked in air, tasting hints of sweet nectar on the breeze, and forced his body into a sitting position. All around him, the colossal trees rose to impossible heights, each trunk tinted an iridescent, violet hue, with leaves the color of molten gold. As he struggled to stand, a delicate rustling in the foliage behind him startled his senses, and he whirled around in time to see a figure approaching. She stepped into view like a dream conjured from the planet's alien magic. A tall, poised woman with sapphire-blue skin that glowed under the tinted sunlight, her hair as white as freshly fallen snow. The gentle slope of her cheeks, the regal line of her jaw, and the intelligence that shone in her golden eyes were unmistakably humanoid, yet distinctly otherworldly. She wore a woven garment of shimmering fibers, revealing an elegant figure that spoke of athletic grace. Her expression, though unreadable at first, softened when their gazes met. With surprising fluency, she addressed him. "You're hurt, yes?" Her words, though accented, were clear. Ethan stared in disbelief, his heart thudding in his chest. Despite his confusion, he managed to nod, too entranced by the vision before him to speak. The woman gestured for him to stay still. She set down a bundle of supplies on the mossy ground, meticulously sifting through them until she found a small container of gel that glowed faintly under the green sun. Her touch was gentle, her hands moving across Ethan's bruised arm and battered shoulder with practiced skill. The cool substance she spread on his skin tingled, but, to his amazement, the pain began to fade almost immediately. Only after she finished her treatment did she extend a hand, helping him to stand more steadily. Her cool fingers pressed into his, delicate yet firm, and he realized that her presence, though exotic, had a distinctly comforting aura. "Can you walk?" she asked, tilting her head as her luminous eyes assessed his condition. Ethan tested his weight carefully. While he felt stiff and sore, he found he could indeed remain upright without too much discomfort. "I can manage," he said, his voice rasping through his dry throat. The woman nodded, then signaled for him to follow. They wound their way past gargantuan ferns with pink-veined fronds, and through drifting clouds of spore-like motes that shimmered silver in the filtered sunlight. Every step Ethan took gave him a glimpse of the planet's arresting wonders. Mushrooms twice his height, reedy vines that hummed faint melodies when brushed, and strange, glassy patches of ground that reflected the sky like polished mirrors. Their journey led them to a small encampment nestled in a clearing by a tranquil, turquoise lake. Ringing the water's edge were modest structures built from woven branches and covered in scale-like tiles that glinted in the sun. The settlement, at first glance, seemed primitive, but the closer Ethan looked, the more he noticed subtle intricacies, delicate architecture, mesmerizing patterns in the materials, and an air of well-practiced efficiency. Emerging from these dwellings were more women of the same species. Each shared the signature sapphire-blue skin, though there were variations in height, hair color, and attire. Their eyes fixed on Ethan with curiosity and a hint of wariness. He counted around half a dozen at first, but as more arrived, the number swelled to nearly 30. The woman who had helped him stood taller now, turning to address the gathering. Ethan did not catch every word, for she spoke in her native tongue, but it was clear she was explaining his presence, possibly mentioning his injuries. Eventually, she turned to him once more, in a gesture of introduction. "My name is Zyra," she said quietly. "We found your ship. It crashed near the forest's edge." Her gaze flicked to the crowd of onlookers. "I am the leader here, in a way, and these are the remaining daughters of Ilari." Unsure of how to respond, Ethan bowed his head, offering a halting, "Thank you for saving me, for helping me." He paused, scanning the settlement. Where am I? Zyra's lips curved into a tender smile. This planet is called Ovaris. Our ancestors once called it the Pleasure Colony, though those times are long gone now. Her words were calm, but carried a bittersweet undertone. We have not seen an outsider in many years, and certainly not a human man. She then explained, with remarkable composure, that the colony had once been a thriving haven for her race, the Illari, a race known for their advanced medical sciences and their love of art and celebrations. Over time, cataclysmic events destroyed much of the infrastructure, scattering survivors across different regions. The small community before him was all that remained in this particular corner of Ovaris. Ethan took in every detail of her tale, quietly marveling at the scope of their struggle. The crash had battered his body, but not his mind. Still, worry flooded him when he thought of his destroyed craft. "Is there any chance I can repair my ship?" he asked softly. "Or call for help?" Zyra's features grew solemn. She lowered her gaze. "The damage to your craft is severe. It is uncertain if the parts can be salvaged for anything but scrap. As for outside help," she waved a hand at the sky, "no one on Ovaris has the means of long-range communication. We have been isolated for decades." A quiet hush followed her words, broken only by the gentle lapping of the crystalline water against the shore. In the ensuing days, Ethan's health improved under Zyra's devoted care. She applied more of the healing gel to his wounds, gave him succulent fruits that contained vital nutrients, and introduced him to the settlement. The other Illari women watched him curiously, some with excitement, others with apprehension. He learned their names, though the Illari language was difficult to master. Still, there was kindness in their eyes, and a gentle acceptance emanating from them all. In turn, Ethan did what he could to be helpful, assisting in gathering fruits, carrying wood, or fetching water from the lake. Though he felt like an awkward outsider, his willingness to adapt did not go unnoticed. He soon discovered that these women hunted the enormous creatures of the forest with remarkable skill. Their swift, silent movements spoke to a culture that once thrived on artistry and grace. Now, survival took precedence, requiring them to be both cunning and courageous. They carried elegant weapons fashioned from bones and crystallized shards of some unknown mineral. The edges of those shards gleamed as though lit from within by the same sapphire radiance that adorned their skin. Their hunts were solemn affairs, carried out with respect for the creatures they pursued, never taking more than what the settlement needed. Ethan witnessed Zyra returning from one such expedition, her hair disheveled from the chase, her cheeks flushed with adrenaline, and he felt a jolt of admiration. In her presence, he saw an empathetic leader, a caretaker of her people, and an embodiment of the mysterious beauty that Ovaris held. Throughout the first few weeks, a routine began to take shape. At dawn, the Illari would gather by the shore, offering what seemed like a meditative tribute to the planet itself, raising their palms to the sky, uttering quiet verses to greet each new day. Ethan, feeling somewhat shy, watched from the side until Zyra invited him to join. Though he did not know the words to their songs, his presence among them seemed to bring quiet encouragement. Then came the daily chores, the foraging, the fishing in crystal-laden streams, and the care of the settlement's more vulnerable members. Ethan learned that not all of these women were warriors. Some tended to the gardens, which were cleverly irrigated by a network of hand-carved channels. Others focused on weaving new garments from fibrous plants that shimmered like silk under the twin suns. Some nights, when the air grew cool and the stars bathed the clearing in pale silver, a group of them would gather around a communal fire. They told stories of old Ovaris, painting a grand tapestry of an advanced civilization that soared among the stars, forging alliances with distant worlds. The Pleasure Colony, they said, had once hosted travelers from across the galaxy, offering a respite from war, strife, and heartbreak. Here, love and revelry flourished, and the Illari lived as ambassadors of joy. But in the wake of a dark conflict that reached even their paradise, the colony fell into ruin, and only a scattered few remained. The sadness in their voices sparked an ache in Ethan's heart, for he imagined the grand halls, the lush gardens, and the shining spires of their lost glory. Yet he also felt immense gratitude for the compassion these survivors extended to him, a lone human man stranded among them. In the midst of this communal warmth, Ethan grew increasingly aware of the women's attention. While all welcomed him, some harbored a more intense curiosity, lingering in conversation or finding reasons to approach him. Yet it was Zyra's presence that captivated him the most. They shared quiet talks in the evenings, perched on the shore together, staring at the ethereal glow of jellyfish-like organisms drifting beneath the glassy surface of the lake. Under the moonlight, a moon that seemed far larger and more radiant than Earth's, Zyra revealed more of her personal burdens. She had assumed leadership of this dwindling community after her mother passed. It was a solemn duty, one that demanded constant vigilance to ensure their survival. She spoke of how relief once came from visitors who brought resources and technology, and how lonely the settlement had become since they lost contact. The more Zyra opened up, the more Ethan found himself drawn to her sense of duty, her compassion, and the grace with which she carried both. On a night when pale blue motes glimmered through the air like embers dancing in the breeze, Ethan gathered his courage and explained more about Earth, about humanity's thirst for exploration and discovery, and about the isolation he felt, being so far from everything he had ever known. To his surprise, Zyra placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, her golden eyes brimming with understanding. "Your journey led you here," she whispered. Perhaps it was not only misfortune, but destiny. As weeks turned into months, Ethan's human perspective sometimes clashed with the Illari way of life. He proposed ideas for improving sanitation or for forging better tools from the wreckage of his ship, and occasionally met resistance. The Illari women, for all their kindness, were slow to adopt new methods, mindful of preserving their traditions. Yet they did not shut him out. Instead, conversations were held under the watchful eyes of the elders among them, a few who bore silver streaks in their hair, along with deeper lines of wisdom etched onto their radiant faces. Through patience, respectful dialogue, and tangible results, like the improved irrigation channels that Ethan helped design, they came to trust him more fully, opening their hearts and minds to the possibilities he presented. Yet, as every day's labor fell into a comfortable rhythm, Ethan could not banish from his mind the questions that plagued him about returning to Earth. He had family there, a life that, while not perfect, had been his own. Each time he voiced his concerns, Zyra simply listened, her expression difficult to read. Though she had told him that no means of travel or communication existed on Ovaris, Ethan began to sense that something was left unsaid. Late one evening, spurred by restless curiosity, he ventured to the far side of the encampment, where the half-buried remains of his ship lay in battered ruin. He crouched by the engine compartments, rummaging for salvageable parts. Hours passed without progress, the starlight dim on scattered metal fragments, until something else caught his attention, a faint, pulsing glow emanating from behind a mass of tangled vines near a rocky hillside. Following this flicker of light, Ethan discovered a hidden entrance to a cavern, partially obscured by thick vegetation. It led into darkness, save for the soft, rhythmic flashing that drew him deeper within. He expected perhaps a cluster of bioluminescent crystals, but what he found startled him beyond words. In a large cavern, ancient machinery hummed with a slow, melodic pulse, covered in eons of dust and moss. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, symbols reminiscent of star charts or cosmic gates. Could it be a piece of Illari technology left from the pleasure colony's heyday? The chamber was massive, dominated by a towering archway of black, swirling material that drank in the faint glow around it. At the apex of this archway, an insignia shimmered, depicting interlocking shapes that glowed a soft azure. It felt alive. The next day, brimming with questions, Ethan confided in Zyra about his discovery. She listened in pensive silence. When he had finished describing the archway, she exhaled a long sigh, as though releasing a burden she had carried for too long. She admitted that the portal was a relic of Illari's advanced past, an experimental conduit meant to allow swift travel between Ovaris and allied planets. But its power source had been lost to time, or so they believed. The last attempts to reactivate it had met with failure, bringing only heartbreak to those who yearned to find help beyond their dying world. With sorrow in her eyes, Zyra told him that no Illari had dared enter the portal's cavern in decades. Some believed the machinery was cursed, others deemed it simply broken. Still, Ethan felt a faint spark of hope. If he could restore the portal, perhaps he could return to Earth, or at least send a signal for rescue. He knew that countless obstacles stood in his way, but the possibility that the portal might function filled his nights with dreams of the stars. Slowly, methodically, he began studying the machinery, enlisting the help of a few inquisitive Illari. Their suspicion waned when they realized he did not seek to abandon them as soon as the portal lit up. On the contrary, Ethan made it clear that if the device could be restored, it might bring renewed life and resources to Ovaris. Soon, a dedicated group began scrubbing the dusty consoles and deciphering the ancient glyphs. Their weeks of careful labor revealed a broken power core, as well as evidence that the portal required an immense energy flow, one that could be generated only by specialized crystals that no longer existed in the settlement's possession. During these hectic months, Ethan felt the stirrings of something deeper whenever Zyra was near. She had grown comfortable in his presence, no longer wearing the mask of calm leadership every moment, but revealing glimpses of her laughter, her frustrations, and her passions. One evening, after an especially grueling day in the cavern, Ethan found himself sitting by the campfire with her, the two of them enveloped in a hush broken only by the crackle of flames and the gentle murmur of the other Illari. His eyes roamed over Zyra's features, lit by the fire's orange glow. She spoke softly, revealing the constant tug-of-war in her heart, the duty she felt to remain with her people, and a secret yearning she nurtured for grand adventures beyond Ovaris. By the time they parted that night, Ethan felt certain that his own heart had shifted. He could no longer deny the blossoming love he held for this sapphire-skinned huntress, whose gentle nature and indomitable spirit had guided him through the darkest days of his life. Still, an unspoken tension wove its way through the camp. Not all of the Illari approved of Ethan's influence, and not all believed that reactivating ancient technology was wise. Some, like Liana, a tall, athletic woman with hair as dark as midnight, openly questioned whether Ethan's presence was a boon or a curse. "We survived this long without such meddling," she argued one day, glowering at the metal contraptions Ethan had scattered near the portal entrance. "Why gamble everything now?" Zyra pleaded for unity, reminding her people that no outcome was guaranteed, but every chance at salvation was worth pursuing. Over time, Ethan built a cautious rapport with Liana and others who doubted him, though their trust came slowly. Months slipped into a year, and Ethan's life took on a shape he never could have anticipated. Each sunrise found him immersed in Illari tasks, from fishing with their delicate nets to learning their formidable hunting techniques in the forest. He had grown stronger, more agile. He even learned to pilot one of the crystalline hovercraft remnants, a small, disc-like platform that the Illari had retained from their advanced era, which still functioned through an archaic but efficient power cell. Though the settlement had only 2 such hovercraft left, they were used sparingly for reconnaissance. With that newfound mobility, Ethan ventured further, scouting for additional survivors or hunting for any sign of the crystal deposits rumored to once power the portal. He discovered crumbling ruins swallowed by vines, half-sunken spires that jutted from the landscape, vestiges of a more glorious time. In one such ruin, he found a set of silver discs inscribed with glyphs, which the elders recognized as instructions for calibrating the portal. They also hinted at hidden crystal caches deep within the planet's surface, though the location was vague and the path fraught with peril. Driven by a sense of promise, Ethan organized a small expedition, with Zyra and several experienced hunters by his side. They departed before dawn, weaving through dense, bioluminescent jungles and climbing rocky slopes that shimmered in the pastel glow of Ovaris's shifting skies. Along the way, they encountered strange beasts, serpentine creatures whose scales refracted light into rainbow arcs, and lumbering behemoths with hide thick as stone, gentle giants that roamed the grasslands in herds. On the 7th day of their journey, they arrived at a cavern network that matched the inscriptions. Once inside, they traversed twisting corridors, their path illuminated by the faint luminescence of crystals embedded in the walls. Their hearts pounded with excitement when they discovered a hidden chamber that sparkled like a midnight sky, rock crystal formations jutting up from the floor like pillars of starlight. One of these pillars, glowing a vibrant turquoise, matched the descriptions from the portal's instructions. Returning to the settlement with fragments of the turquoise crystal, the expedition was met with cheers and songs of relief. The atmosphere became celebratory, filled with renewed hope that the portal might indeed be reactivated. Days of testing followed, as Ethan and the Illari experimented with ways to fuse the crystals into the damaged power core. The process demanded a delicate approach, and every mishap led to showers of sparks and glowing smoke. Still, progress was made. The machinery began to hum at a higher pitch, the swirling black archway flickering with new energy. In the midst of these breakthroughs, Ethan felt his bond with Zyra deepen into an unspoken devotion. The settlement's daily life, once overshadowed by survival, now danced with possibility. More than once, Ethan caught glimpses of the younger Illari weaving new garments patterned with astral motifs, as though they celebrated a future that might bridge Ovaris to the wider galaxy once again. But success, he soon realized, came with hidden costs. As the portal's power surged closer to full activation, an unknown consequence emerged. The planet's tectonic activity stirred in response to the energy discharge. Mild tremors rattled the settlement, unsettling the local wildlife and cracking open fissures in the forest floor. Alarmed, Ethan halted the experiments to confer with the elders. Some believed that such disturbances were minor, a small price to pay for re-establishing contact with the outside universe. Others feared that continuing would awaken destructive forces slumbering beneath Ovaris's surface. Zyra, torn between hope for the future and responsibility for her people's safety, looked to Ethan for guidance. He found her on a moonlit night, pacing at the water's edge, her white hair cascading over her shoulders in disarray. She turned to him, eyes filled with a sorrowful mixture of fear and longing. "Is this truly our destiny?" she asked, voice trembling. "Are we meant to sacrifice our world's peace to revive what once was?" Ethan searched her face in the dim glow. He spoke of balance, of carefully monitoring the seismic readings, and adjusting the portal's power flow to minimize planetary impact. Yet he did not hide the truth. They were treading in unknown waters. Even if they succeeded in stabilizing the portal, there was no telling what lay beyond, be it the potential for rescue or the threat of unfriendly eyes. Zyra listened to him in silence, her features lit by starlight that glinted off her sapphire skin. In a moment that felt like both an eternity and a fleeting breath, she leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently against his. It was an Illari gesture of profound trust, and it flooded Ethan's heart with warmth. "We face this uncertainty together," she whispered. "Whatever may come." The next morning, the elders sanctioned another attempt, this time with careful modulation of the energy flow. Liana, who had once doubted Ethan's intentions, now stood side by side with him, calibrating the power couplings. The entire settlement watched from a safe distance as the black archway erupted in a swirl of azure luminescence. Symbols on the cavern walls blazed in tandem, forming lines of script that flared and faded. With a sound like rushing wind, the void within the archway shimmered, then rippled. In that instant, Ethan caught a fleeting glimpse of a star-filled expanse, a horizon that looked like Earth's night sky. Then a tremor shook the ground, forcing them to shut down the power before it could stabilize. Despite the abrupt end, euphoria gripped many of them. The portal had awakened, if only for a moment. And in that moment, Ethan had glimpsed a piece of his home. Another year passed in the blink of an eye, full of trials and triumphs, heartbreak and growth. Ovaris tested Ethan and the Illari women at every turn. Massive storms swept across the continent, forcing them to strengthen their dwellings and gather scarce resources. Strange plagues of glowing insects devoured entire swaths of vegetation, leading to food shortages that required creative solutions. The settlement adapted, planting new crops in distant fields, using the crystals they recovered for advanced irrigation experiments. Through it all, the glimmer of the portal remained their guiding light, a promise that the future held more than mere survival. In the second year of Ethan's time on Ovaris, he found himself more integrated than he ever believed possible. He spoke Illari fluently now, engaged in the daily rituals with reverence, and even learned to craft simpler forms of the crystalline tools. He stood among these 30 women not merely as an anomaly, but as a cherished friend and an unofficial ambassador of Earth's ingenuity. He and Zyra grew close, more than close, bound by an unspoken love that made the settlement's humble huts feel like a home. At times, he caught himself in a daze, realizing how little he missed the hurried clamor of Earth. Life on Ovaris had changed him, deepened his respect for living in harmony with nature, and awakened a tenderness for this proud, resilient people. But the portal called to him still, in the quiet hours of the night. Whenever he gazed upon the star-strewn skies of Ovaris, a part of him yearned for Earth's familiar constellations. Was it selfish to want to see his old home again, to share with his family all he had learned, or to offer the Illari women the chance to reconnect with the galaxy? The final piece of the puzzle came when an elder named Neres approached Ethan with a scroll she had guarded for decades, a crumbling chart that contained the precise calibrations needed for the ancient gateway. Neres admitted to having withheld this knowledge in fear that the portal's reactivation would invite disaster, but seeing Ethan's commitment to safeguarding Ovaris had softened her stance. Armed with this last puzzle piece, Ethan organized a second expedition to the Crystal Caverns, seeking an even larger shard that could be used to stabilize the power fluctuations. Zyra insisted on accompanying him, as did a few of the settlement's most experienced hunters. Their trek led them deeper than before, testing their endurance against claustrophobic tunnels and the threat of subterranean predators. After many perilous hours, they found a gargantuan turquoise crystal, nearly as tall as 3 men standing atop one another. It hummed with an ancient, resonant music, as though it contained the echoes of 1,000 cosmic pulses. Carefully, they mined a section of it, preserving its structure. By the time they returned, battered and exhausted, the settlement greeted them with anxious relief. The final push to awaken the portal commenced at dawn. The majority of the Illari stood in the cavern, forming a wide circle, their expressions a mix of trepidation and hope. Ethan installed the crystal into the power core, reciting the calibration notes from the ancient scroll. He glanced over at Zyra, her eyes locked on him with unwavering faith. Taking a steadying breath, he initiated the power sequence. This time, the archway did not merely flicker to life, it roared with energy, swirling in a vortex of indigo and silver. The tremors returned, shaking the stone beneath their feet, but the new crystal did indeed stabilize the resonance. The shimmering passage crackled with potential, and gradually, beyond the swirling energy, an image began to form. Ethan's heart thundered in his chest as he recognized a glimpse of Earth's orbit, a satellite drifting across the screen of cosmic black. Yet the moment of triumph was also one of decision. The gateway was open. Only one question remained. Would Ethan step through, returning to Earth after 2 years in an alien paradise, or remain on Ovaris with Zyra and the community that had become his family? Silence weighed upon the gathered Illari, who watched him with wide, expectant eyes. Zyra stood apart from them, a stoic expression on her face, though he could see the anguish in her trembling hands. She would never demand he stay. That was not her way. This choice was his alone. His gaze roamed the cavern, from the swirling portal and its promise of home, to the faces of the women who had rescued him, cared for him, and embraced him as one of their own. He thought of how Earth had been his birthright, how family and friends there might still wonder if he was alive. He remembered, too, the hush of Ovaris's forests at dusk, the laughter shared around moonlit fires, the bond that had blossomed in his heart for Zyra. He trembled, torn between 2 worlds. With a heavy breath, Ethan stepped forward. Eyes stinging with tears, he turned to the Illari, to Zyra, and reached out a hand toward her. Her expression broke from stoic calm to trembling hope, and she placed her hand in his. In that gesture, Ethan made his choice. "We'll return together," he said quietly, his voice echoing in the stunned silence of the cavern. Some gasps filled the air, Zyra's among them. Summoning all his courage, Ethan addressed the settlement. "If this gateway truly connects to Earth, we can seek aid, resources, and perhaps a new future for Ovaris. And if danger lies beyond, then let me face it with you, not alone." He paused, tears threatening to spill as he squeezed Zyra's hand. "I will not abandon you, or all that we have built together." An exultant cheer rose from the Illari, but Zyra's was the voice he heard most clearly. She whispered her gratitude, stepping closer, pressing a soft kiss against his forehead, her tears mingling with his. Side by side, they walked through the swirling energies of the portal, a leap of faith into the unknown. A rush of kaleidoscopic lights enveloped them, the sensation of being pulled in every direction at once. Then, with a sudden whoosh, they emerged under a star-strewn sky. The outlines of Earth's familiar horizon spread out before them. Overcome with awe, the Illari who followed gazed at Earth's moon in wonder, while Ethan stood transfixed by the recognition of his homeworld. In the days to come, after initial shock and confusion, Earth authorities scrambled to understand the sudden appearance of alien visitors from a rift in space. Yet, the Illari's peaceful intentions, coupled with Ethan Drake's passionate testimonies, paved the way for diplomatic overtures. Scientists rushed to Ovaris to offer medical assistance and to learn from the Illari's advanced healing knowledge. Engineers marveled at the tapestry of technology and ecology coexisting in the settlement, eager to foster collaboration. Over the following months, supply missions journeyed through the portal, bringing construction materials, seeds, and essential goods, while the Ilari offered Earth vital lessons in sustainable living and astonishing breakthroughs in regenerative medicine. All the while, Ethan and Zyra navigated this newfound alliance, splitting their time between Earth's bustling domains and Ovaris's serene frontiers. Their bond grew stronger, fortified by each challenge and every success. Within 2 years of first stepping onto Ovaris, Ethan had effectively bridged two worlds, forging a sense of unity that transcended mere survival. The settlement on Ovaris blossomed with renewed population and resources, and families from across the galaxy, intrigued by the newly restored pleasure colony's promise, began to arrive once more, this time in the spirit of cooperation and respect. Standing on the shores of the turquoise lake one late afternoon, as the sky shimmered pink and gold, Ethan felt Zyra's hand slip into his. "You've given us the future we thought lost," she murmured, her golden eyes reflecting a glimmer of heartfelt gratitude. "And you," he replied, softly tracing the delicate shape of her fingers, "have shown me a new meaning of home." Their faces lit with quiet smiles as they turned to watch an Earth-built vessel glide overhead, carrying guests who would soon share in the wonders of Ovaris. Hope was no longer a distant dream. Where once Ovaris's vibrant forests had hidden a small community of 30 women who feared their world might fade into obscurity, it now thrived as a beacon of cooperation. And in the gentle hush of that twilight, Ethan Drake, once a lone man stranded among alien huntresses, realized that fate had woven his life's threads into a tapestry far grander than any he could have imagined. Though he had been trapped on an alien planet for 2 years, in truth, he had found friendship, purpose, and a love that transcended the boundaries of the stars themselves. And as the wind carried the sweet fragrance of Ovaris's alien blossoms across the lake, Ethan closed his eyes in a moment of pure contentment, thankful that his story had led him here, and that, ultimately, it ended in a happiness he had never dared to dream possible.